The nature of pain and pleasure. When we are pained because of the absence of pleasure, then and then only we do feel the need of pleasure. Wherefore, we call pleasure the alpha and omega of the blessed life. Pleasure is our first and kindred good. It is the starting point of every choice and of every aversion, and to it we come back, inasmuch as we make feeling the rules by which to judge of every good thing. And since pleasure is our first and native good, for that reason we do not choose every pleasure whatsoever, but oft time pass over many pleasure when a greater annoyance ensues from them, and oft times we consider pains superior to pleasures, when submission to pains for a longer time brings as a consequence a greater pleasure. While therefore all pleasure, because it is naturally akin to us, is good, not all pleasure is choice-worthy, just as all pain is an evil, and yet not all pain is to be shunned. It is, however, by measuring one against the other, and by looking at the conveniences and inconveniences, that all these matters must be judged. Sometimes we treat the good as an evil, and the evil, on the contrary, as a good. Again, we regarded independence of outward things as a great good, not so as in all cases to use little, but so as to be contented with little if we not have much, being honestly persuaded that they have the sweetest enjoyments of luxury who stand least in need of it, and that whatever is natural is easily procured, and only the vain and worthless it is hard to win. Plain fare gives as much pleasure as a costly diet, when once the pain of want has been removed, while bread and water confer the highest possible pleasure when they are brought to hungry lips. To habituate oneself, therefore, to simple and inexpensive diet supplies all that is needful for health, and enables a man to meet the necessary requirements of life without shrinking, and it places us in a better condition when we approach at intervals a costly fare, and renders us fearless of fortune. Having explained the categorization of desires, Epicurus dives now into the heart of his ethic. His reasoning is clear and structured by points. The first question is, why should we look for pleasure in life? And the answer is quite straightforward. The feeling of pain and unease arise when we feel that something is lacking. This raises the awareness that pleasure is something that we need. We identify as such pain as the absence of pleasure, and vice versa, pleasure as the absence of pain. This is a fundamental point, because Epicurus doesn't provide a positive definition of pleasure, something like pleasure is this thing or that thing. On the contrary, it is a negative definition. Whatever removes pain is pleasure. Every being is naturally inclined to avoid suffering and research pleasure, so much as that pleasure it is an essential feature of a blessed life and the highest good we may have. But don't be tricked anyway. It is not just a full-fledged hedonism without restrictions. Yes, we reject pain and we look for pleasure, says Epicurus, but we look to maximize the effect of the pleasure, to make it last longer, so that we can have on the long run the least part possible of pain. This means that we do not choose indiscriminately all the pleasures possible. If an immediate pleasure may be followed from a longer series of annoyance and pain, then we reject it, because in our economy it is better to renounce to a specific pleasure than to have to endure a wider discomfort that could be the consequence of that pleasure. In the same way, we can instead accept to undergo through certain pain and unease, if we know that these will be followed from a prolonged state of tranquility and absence of pain. I think that the example of the teeth could help on both cases. I could enjoy daily a certain amount of sweet treats, but on the long run this could compromise the health of my teeth, and if I don't take proper care of these, it could lead to several teeth affected, and all the pain that comes from each, as well as further discomfort in eating, sleeping, and other activities, as the pain will prevent me from doing any other things with tranquility. On the other side, if I have some teeth that are in need of treatment, it may not be pleasant to go to the dentist, staying some time to undergo treatment, as well as paying a good sum of money for it, but it is a necessary pain that we choose to go through willingly, knowing that after the treatment, the pain will disappear and we will be able to proceed on our lives without the same unease caused from the toothache. That's why Epicurus specifies, yes, we are naturally aching to pleasure, but not all pleasures are choice-worthy. And we are naturally adverse to pains, but some pains can be more choice-worthy as necessary steps to remove further discomforts. So, which should be the golden rule to discern between pleasures and pains? Epicurus gives us two principles, easy but comprehensive. The first one is a cost-benefit rule. If something could have more negative consequences than positive ones, it is already a red flag that would be better to do without it, if possible. Measuring convenience against inconveniences is the key. The second principle instead is based on the minimum needed. In all things, it says, we strive to preserve our independence, meaning that over-reliance on something may affect our freedom or could make us more exposed to possible suffering if we are denied what we may depend from. The best way to cut as much as possible our dependence from outer things is to train ourselves to look for the minimum needed to remove the discomfort. This because if we find pleasure in something and we want more, but we may not get it, then we'll increase the pain for the lack of it. If we content ourselves with the bare minimum needed to remove the discomfort, then we'll be serene when we'll get just that. But if instead we get accustomed to have more, when we'll have only a small part of what we want, then we will feel again the unease. Linking this to what we said before makes indeed sense if we consider pleasure as the absence of pain. It means that whatever works to remove the pain is qualitatively the same, regardless of the specific object in every situation. If hunger is the pain, bread and water causes exactly the same pleasure of a lavish banquet, because they remove the hunger. On the contrary, the highest extent of pleasure comes instead from a previous higher level of pain, so that whoever eats regularly will have a smaller pleasure in normal meals, but whoever was starving would derive from food the uttermost pleasure in feeling that the unease that he suffered for so long is slowly disappearing. So, among the lines, besides this, it appears sketched also a third principle, which is more a corollary of the first two, and it's something that we could call the principle of attainability. Who is less in need of something will also be more serene, and if by any chance it may come across to it due to favorable fortune, it can recognize that it is something special and it can enjoy it fully, appreciating the good fortune that brought it. Our sphere of value criteria actually should take in consideration what is required to attain something, as this would highlight automatically the cost benefits of the first principle. All those things that satisfy a natural and necessary need are relatively easier to produce, with less efforts. On the contrary, many of those things that are visibly hard to win and require us to go through protracted anxiety and pain, if we look well at these, well, many times we may see them as unnecessary, and we can think that they are high valued, while in fact they may be worthless in bringing a real life pleasure. In other words, if we move Epicurus nowadays, he would suggest you to focus on gaining daily bread more than to make money in any way to buy yourself a Lamborghini. This because if you have your tranquility by focus on the real needs, you may also have less or no fear about the future, saying in it that whatever change it may happen, it won't affect your ability to satisfy the real needs.